Hello everyone, welcome to the video lecture for Chapter 1, Section 1. This is over slopes and equations of lines. A few things before we get started on this. This is my first time using this software, so if there are any technical glitches, please bear with me. Also, I'm going to focus mainly on applications in this section. If you're still a little bit rusty with your algebra, you may need to get out your textbook and look through pages 2 through 9 before doing these specific examples. Okay, a few quick points on the main formulas for linear equations. First, focusing on slope. Slope is your basic rise over run. Rise is your change in y. You'll notice this one with this triangle. This is delta y. The delta means change. So you have your change in y over your run, which is your change in x. And here's your formulas that you may remember from college algebra. The two forms for the linear equations we'll look at, the first one is slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Most students have a fairly easy time remembering this one, and this is the one that we'll use most of the time. There is also the point slope form, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. If you remember this one and you like using it, you can. The book will focus on this one at times, but I generally tend to use y equals mx plus b. It works. I'll show you a few things both ways, and you can choose whichever method you prefer. Okay, so first example here says that we have this table with some data that's showing you the annual cost for tuition and fees at some colleges for the last several years in 2000 to 2009. What they've done with this is they've taken the table and they've created what's called a scatter plot to give you basically a graph of the data. By looking at this graph, you can see that the data points, for the most part, follow a straight line. So they say we can approximate this with a linear equation. In this case, we need to come up with the equation for that straight line. Notice they've said to use the first and last data points to determine the equation. So we'll be using the data points for the year 2000 and 2009. And they've also said to let t equals 0 correspond to the year 2000. The first thing I'm going to do here, just to keep it a little bit more simple, is let's use an x instead of a t, just so we don't have to worry about writing a t instead of an x. Alright, we're using the first two data points, so we're using 2000, 2009, and then I'm going to look over here. Remember they said x equals 0 should be the year 2000. So I'm going to come over here and add my x's. So for the year 2000, they said x should be 0. So 2001, x would be 1, 2, so on and so forth. 2008, x would be 8. 2009, x will be 9. Anytime you have a word problem, especially if you get stuck on these, my first recommendation is always to make a list of yourself. What does x represent and what does y represent? So in this case, x is our years since 2000. And y is representing the dollar amount for our tuition. And like I said, especially if you get stuck on these things, take the moment to write that down so you remember what each variable represents. Once we've got our variables stated, we're going to take all this paragraph and all this data, and I'm just going to write out the 2 points that we're interested in. So the first point we have, remember x is our years since 2000, is that very first one where x was 0, and the y value for that is 3508. So there's our first data point. The second data point, x was 9, and our y value is 7020. So there's our 2 points of interest. Alright, we're looking for the equation for a straight line. So we're going to be looking for something in the form y equals mx plus b. We're going to start by finding that finding the slope. Slope is rise over run. We have our 2 points that we're looking for. So I'm going to do change in y over change in x. So I'm going to take my two y values, and I'm going to subtract them. 7,020 minus 3,508. Here's my change in y. I need change in x. 9 minus 0. Now it doesn't matter which number you use first, but make sure that you keep them in order. When I did my change in y's, I used the lower point first, and when I did the change in x, I also used the lower point first. Just make sure you keep them in the correct order. So we can take this, simplify it down, subtract, see if I have room for this, 3512 over 9, and I'll round this off to 390.2. That is our slope. Alright, so we know we're looking for y equals mx plus b. M was our slope. B is your y-intercept. If we go back and look at the data in this case, since we had a point where x equals 0, and if you look on the graph there where x equals 0, we have our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is this 35,508. And this works in this case, like I said, because x is 0. If x is 0, that's your y-intercept. So our y-intercept is going to be 3,508. So in this case, we have everything we need now to make our equation. Our linear equation, y equals m 390.2, sure m, x plus b 3508. That is your answer. When you do this, always make sure you put in the number for m, put in your number for b, but you'll leave the x and the y in its place. Okay, in our next example, it says we know that the sales for a small company were $27,000 in its second year of operation and $63,000 in its fifth year. We're going to let y represent the amount of sales during the X year of operation. Two parts to this question. The first one, we need the equation for a linear sales line. And then the second part, we're going to use that answer to find out how many years must pass before the sales surpassed $100,000. Again, since we have this application problem, I'm going to start by listing out what our variables represent. What is X? What is Y? Alright, so they told us here that Y represents the sales. So I want to put dollar amount of sales for the X year of operation. So X is the year. Okay, we're coming up with the equation for a linear sales line. So we have the word linear. We know we're looking for y equals mx plus b. In this case, we're going to start by finding the slope. And in order to do that, we need to look through the information they gave us and figure out what the 2 points are that they gave us. They didn't tell us the slope, so we're looking for that, but we do have 2 points embedded within this description. So we're going to find those 2 points, where x is the year, y is the dollar amount in sales. So if we look through this, we have the $27,000. That's the amount of sales, so that's a y value. Then it says that's during the second year. So x is going to be 2 for the second year. And then the number of sales is 27,000. So that's the first point. And then if we continue reading, we have $63,000. That's for the fifth year. So again, the year is our x. So we're going to do the 5 first. And then the 63,000. So those are our 2 points, and that's where students struggle, is being able to read through that and realize they gave me 2 ordered pairs. These are my points. This is what x and y represents. So if you take that time to write that out, it will help you keep all your thoughts organized as you work through the rest of the problem. Alright, now we're ready to find the slope. Slope, change in y over change in x. So I'm going to come over here and say slope. We're looking for an M. Let me get my screen set up the way I need it. Alright, so in this case, change in Y, we're looking at 63,000 minus the 27,000. Divide that by change in X, 5 minus 2. There's our slope. Can work that out. Top part, we're going to have 36,000 over 3, and continue to reduce that. We've got a slope of 12,000. That's your slope, that's your M. Okay, from here I'm going to split off and I'm going to show you two different ways you could find the equation. We've got the slope. We've got one part of that. At this point, we know y equals mx plus b, because we're looking for a straight line, and right now we know that m is 12,000. We don't know what this b is yet. Alright, so in order to find b, again I'm going to show you two methods here. The first one uses the point slope formula, which says y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And in this case, you're going to plug in one of the points for your x1 and y1, and you'll plug in the number we found for our slope for m. So I'm going to leave the y. Y1, we have our 2 points. We have the 2 with 27,000 and the 5 with 63,000. You can choose either one of those 2 points. In some cases, one will work out easier than the other, but either one works. I'm going to choose the 2 and the 27,000 just because the numbers are a little smaller. It's the only reason. So I'm going to do y minus 27,000 equals m, those are 12,000, times x minus x. I need to choose the x that goes with my 27,000, so I'm choosing 2. Alright, from this point I've got everything plugged in, but I need to solve this for y. When you want your final answer, you want it to look like y equals mx plus b. So we're going to start by distributing. 12,000 x minus 24,000, and then we need to add the 27,000. $12,000x, adding my 27,000, that'll give me plus 3,000. Okay, so this is the solution if you were to work it out this way. Our equation is right here. 12,000x plus 3,000. Now I'm going to show you a different way that many of my students prefer, and the choice is totally up to you. The homework will show you this way when you look in the book or on the help options, but if you want to do it the other way, a lot of my students think it's easier. So we're going to call this an optional method. In this method, you're going to use y equals mx plus b. And I think that's part of why a lot of my students like it, because most people just tend to remember that formula. What you're going to do in this case, like I mentioned before, we know y equals 12,000. We know the m. So we know 12,000x plus b is just the b that we don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in something for every part of this formula and figure out what b is. So again, we're going to go back and look at our 2 points, the 2, 27,000, and the 5 with 63,000. Choose either of those. It doesn't matter. Again, I'm going to choose the 2 with the 27,000 just because the numbers are smaller. So if I look at that point, y is 27,000. So I'm going to plug that in. 27,000, put that where y is, equals m, I found my slope was 12,000. X, I'm going to use the x that corresponds to the 27,000. So I'm putting in a 2 for x. B, I still don't know. So B is B. Now I can take this equation and I can find out what B is. 27,000, 12,000 times 2, 24,000 plus B. And then subtract 24,000. We get 3,000 equals B. So we've used this, we figured out what B is, and now you just have to remember to actually go back and write your solution. So in this case, we know our answer is going to be y equals m is 12,000, x plus B, now we know B. B is 3,000. Now notice this is the same answer we got before when we used the other method. Like I said, either way is fine. A lot of my students prefer this way. But like I said, if you're doing your homework in my math lab, it's going to show you the first way. So this is what my math lab will show you. This one. My math lab will do it that way. Alright, both of those answer part A. That's answer to part A. This is the answer to A, just depending on which method you used. We need to answer part B. Part B said to use our answer to find out how many years must pass before our sales surpass $100,000. Alright, so if I move over here, there's a little bit of room for part B. What are we looking for? If you read through this, it's asking us to find out how many years. Since we've written down our variables mean, we know if we're looking for years, we're looking for X. And then it tells us when our sales surpass 100,000, there's your sales, that's your Y. So in this case, we know a Y value and we're looking for X. So I'm going to take our solution. Y equals 12,000, X plus 3,000. And we said we know Y, we're looking for X. So for Y, I'm going to put in the 100,000. And we're going to solve this equation now for X. Alright, so we need to subtract 3,000. So we have 97,000 equals 12,000x. We've subtracted our 3,000 out. And now divide. Divide both sides by 12,000. We'll have x on the right. And on the left-hand side, 97,000 divided by 3,000. What do we end up with there? 8.1. That'll give us our solution for x. What was x? X is the number of years. So, again, just keeping up with what x represents and what y represents. It's going to take you a little over 8 years in order for your sales to surpass $100,000. Okay, this is our last example for today. This one says to find the equation of a line that passes through the point 4,5 and is parallel to the line 3x minus 6y equals 7. So in this case, it's asking about parallel lines. You need to remember that parallel lines have the same slopes. If you're looking for perpendicular lines, that's when you have the opposite reciprocal slopes, where you change the sign and flip it. That's for perpendicular. This question is asking about parallel. So we need to find an equation that has the same slope as this one they've given us here. First, we need to find out what is the slope of this line. In order to do that, we just need to rearrange this equation, make it into the form y equals mx plus b. So we can start that by subtracting the 3x. That'll leave us with minus 6y equals, I'm subtracting the 3x, Looks like that. And then we're almost there. We need y equals mx plus b. I need to divide by -6. Dividing both sides by -6. That'll give me my y equals. And then here comes my slope. -3 over -6. That's 1/2 x. And then I'll have my -7 over 6. So I've just taken both parts of this, the -3x and the +7, and divided each of those by -6. So -3 over -6, get my positive 1/2, and then my 7 over -6, I get my -7/6 fraction. So by putting this into slope-intercept form, I can now see I've got my slope. Right there, there's our slope. Yep. Okay, since I'm doing parallel lines, I'll be using the same slope. I do not need to change it. So now I know the slope. I know one point. And that's all I need to know to find the equation. Again, anytime you know the slope and you know point, that's where you have the two options on which way you want to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you both of these again, just so you have one more example of each route and you can decide which one you prefer. If we start by doing y equals mx, or let's start with the slope point form. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And in this case, we leave the y and the x. So we have y minus y1. Again, we're looking at our point, 4, 5. 4 is the x, 5 is the y. So we have our y equals m. We found our slope. Our slope was 1/2 times x minus x from our point up there was 4. Have everything filled in. Now we need to take this and solve it, put it back in a slope-intercept form. First thing we need to do is distribute the 1/2. So we've got 1/2 x, and then 1/2 times -4, -2. And then we'll add our 5. Y equals 1/2 x, add the 5, -2 plus 5 will give us +3. And there's our solution. The pen will work. Alright, so that's one method. Again, first involves knowing the formula and then working through it. Other way you could work this one out, I'll put a big or right here. Either way, you do not need both. I will never require you to do one way or the other. I'm just showing both, so you have two options. Okay, other option, you're going to start with y equals mx plus b. And we're going to use this equation to figure out what b is. So we've already found m. Y, again, going back to your point, we've got that point 4, 5 they gave us. The y value was 5. Our slope, we found that, it was 1/2. X, they gave us that point, is 4. And then we're looking for b. So now we'll just take this equation, solve it for b. And generally the algebra works a little easier. And I think that's why students like this one better. 1/2 of 4 will be 2. And then we subtract the 2. And we find out b is 3. Then just make sure you don't stop. You actually take a minute to write the answer. Your equation will be y equals m, so 1/2, x plus b, we figured out, is 3. And there's your solution. Again, both methods, you get the same answer. You don't have to do both, just pick one, go with that one. If you have any questions on this, definitely let me know. Again, if you're still struggling with the algebra, I mainly just did application problems, but just a few pointers if you need it. Go through the textbook. There's some more basic algebra examples in there. And then also, if you look in my math lab to the multimedia, there is a video lecture that covers the beginning examples out of this section that are just algebra. So if you need that without all the words in your way and the application problems, that video may be a good help for you. That's not a video I've created, it's one that came with the my MathLab software. If you have any questions over the weekend, definitely email me. Otherwise, I will see you guys next week on Monday. Hope you have a good weekend. Be safe, and we will go into section 2 of chapter 1 on Monday.